Welcome to 60 Skills. We will now start a review of Real Alchemy, a primer of practical alchemy by Robert Bartlett. The book starts with a fine table of contents where it breaks down the overall work, going into both the history of alchemy, its theory, the relationship to astrology, various alchemical processes including herbal alchemy, waterworks, the Kabbalah and alchemy, and an introduction to the mineral and metallic works using both the wet and dry method, as well as information on his personal work involving antimony and the seeds of the metal. So the book starts off with a lovely drawing of real alchemy and a definition. Throughout the book, you're going to find many quotes from classic works on alchemy. In this one, he has one from Isaac Holland's Opera Vegetalia. Then chapter 1 starts with a brief history of alchemy, going through its traditional history involving Egypt and other places. Again, for people unfamiliar with the practice, this is quite useful. Along the way, he has many valuable diagrams, such as this one involving the basic signs and symbols of alchemy, which again, for someone who has practiced in the art is nothing new, but for a complete beginner is extremely helpful. He also gets into how to actually do these things. In fact, there's a whole very workable section on spagyrics, which are one of my favorites, as working with spagyrics allows you to develop the 7 basics or your own 7 basic spagyrics related to the traditional planets and days of the week. This is a very potent method for personal development, and this is by far the clearest breakdown or definition of how that is done. So he gets into the general process involving separation, purification, and recombination. Again, for people who are familiar with alchemy, this is nothing new, but this is one of the clearest modern works on the subject. He also provides both an easy and more complex method for doing this. He then gets into all of your basic alchemical processes. This includes things like the different kinds of fire that can be used, distillation, digestion, extraction, typically done using an alcohol medium, fermentation, so on and so forth. Again, these are very clear modern definitions of how to do these things. Also, there's a section on calcination and the recombination of your vegetable works. Finally, he begins to get into the zodiac and its relationship, again providing many useful charts and diagrams along the way. Now he gets into the pure herbal aspect of alchemy, which, to be honest, is probably the most frequently practiced form of this in a modern era. So he discusses what the ends are, how the ends tincture is prepared, going on to things like the vegetable stone, even defining it as, in the creation of the stone in the vegetable kingdom, we seek to balance the elements of an herb in their most exalted form, which represents the true quintessence of the plant. He goes on to talk about other aspects of this. And then he gets into the waterworks. The waterworks typically don't receive much attention in modern alchemy, which is a shame, as I've personally found them to be quite profound. So he describes the different solvents used, what the waterworks actually consist of. And again, like throughout the rest of the book, he has many lovely pictures and diagrams taken from traditional sources. Talks about different kinds of distillation, the salts that can be formed, and so on. Now in chapter 8, he returns to the fire, so to speak, and gets into the different kinds of quintessence and fire that can be generated. Again, with another lovely chart breaking all this down in plain modern English. It's not that this information isn't available somewhere else. It's just that this medium that Robert Bartlett is presenting happens to be one of the clearest in modern English available. He is also a delightful man, and I had the honor of training at one of his training camps before he moved to an entirely online method of teaching. Now, in one of my favorite parts of the book, he gets into the relationship between Kabbalah and alchemy. To me, this is quite profound, but to those of you who do not practice Kabbalah yourselves, this may or may not be very important. As well as he gets into the various elemental representations and the 4 different worlds involving the Kabbalah. Now, to many people, this will be the most important part of the work, as this is an introduction to the mineral and metallic works. Please keep in mind the preparation of these works themselves can be quite dangerous. So if you're going to do this, you need to have a great deal of experience in a laboratory, preferably in a modern chemistry setting. I would also recommend his online coursework involving this. It is, in fact, quite powerful and very profound. Now, he gets into first the wet method of generating the metallic works. And again, this is by far the clearest explanation of how this would work. I still think his online training is necessary in order to actually do the work, but for those looking for a modern definition of how to go about doing this without having to sort through many older works, this is quite literally the way to go. Also, he gets into the use of urine, and this in turn has many very valuable uses. However, again, this is one of those aspects of alchemy that tends to get speed bumped in modern practice. So he talks about preparation of the metals. He also gives you an excellent source of the relationship between specific metals and the planets. Now this to me is one of the most valuable things that he gives in the book. He actually tells you what the various oils actually do. And this is very useful because in most traditional sources, the definition of what the oils do tends to be a little obtuse, kind of hard to figure out. In this book, he gets into specific examples of this, particularly with oil of antimony, which I think is important, as this happens to be his personal area of focus in his own practice, where he mentions it as the best blood purifier available and to help restore youth. He also describes what to do with oil of gold, oil of silver, oil of mercury, oil of copper, iron, and tin, as well as lead. So he gets into the more advanced methods of the wet method, talking about different philosophical mercuries, the use of red wine, before finally getting on to the dry method. Now again, if you're going to pursue the dry method, it's very easy to severely injure, if not in fact kill yourself, using this method. You need to have a proper lab set up, and you need to have very good experience or extensive experience with modern chemistry for this to be a safe process. I strongly advise taking courses at your local community college if you have the means. Again, many more classical drawings, which of course are very helpful. Now he gets into the use of niter and vitriol, dissolving waters and mineral acids, the dry menstruum. Now he gets into his personal practice with antimony. Also keep in mind, he has an entire book written on the topic with extensive lab notes. But this is by far the clearest definition of what can be done with this material in modern English. Gets into the glass, the vinegar, the oil, the star regulus, so on and so forth. Again, with using modern English to explain what's being done. He also gets into the seeds of metals, which is a topic that doesn't really receive a whole lot of attention in modern alchemy. It gets into the issue of reproducing metals via the seeds. This is, in fact, a fascinating thing to look at. Finally, of course, we get into the issue of the Philosopher's Stone. This is one of the better written sources on this. He talks about divine cinnabar and a variety of other things. The various mercuries used. And the multiplication of the red stone. Again, a fascinating topic. Now, as always, in my more favorite books, they have both sources that you can look at in terms of how to apply this yourself. For example, the different herbs and their planetary associations in this case, as well as the organs and the metals and the days of the week. Now, again, my favorite part of this book is its bibliography. He gives quite an extensive list of different works you can look at that this book was drawn on to further expand your knowledge of modern alchemy. Everything from classical sources like Paracelsus to more modern works like Hauck's The Emerald Tablet, Alchemy for Personal Transformation. Now, if you have the means, I strongly advise pursuing Robert Bartlett's online training. It is, in fact, quite extensive and a real gem. There's no telling how long that will be available for, but it is also quite cost-effective. Keeping in mind that Robert Allen Bartlett is more than likely the leading living alchemist in North America at this time, if not the Western world. He is certainly one of the most accessible. The only criticism of this book that I would give is it doesn't really get into the issue of animal alchemy. In many sources, this has become a bit of a red line, or third rail, if you will, and certainly needs expansion in a modern setting as he is provided in this work. So if you've enjoyed this review, check out the rest of the 60 Skills channel. Otherwise, train hard and be well.